Layla Rahman, the glamorous millionaire housewife of Dubai, and Omar, the young driver she risked everything for, set off a chain of passion and betrayal that unleashed Kareem Rahman's cold-blooded revenging in a murder that shocked the city Esali. In Dubai, a city built on wealth, luxury, and power, Layla Rahman lived a life many could only dream of. She was the wife of Kareem Rahman, a wealthy businessman whose empire stretched across the Middle East. Their mansion was more than just a home, it was a symbol of status. With marble staircases, crystal chandeliers, imported Italian furniture, and a collection of luxury cars gleaming in the driveway, Layla was admired in elite circles for her beauty and elegance, always dressed in designer gowns and adorned with the finest jewelry. To outsiders, she appeared to have everything, but the truth beneath the polished image was far from perfect. Kareem's wealth had given Layla comfort, but it had also trapped her in a life that felt suffocating. He spent much of his time traveling, chasing business deals and international partnerships, often gone for weeks at a time. When he was home, his mind was elsewhere, occupied with meetings, phone calls, and financial pursuits. Conversations between them were brief and formal, stripped of affection. Layla, though, surrounded by gold and luxury, was lonely. The parties, the shopping trips, and the lavish dinners could not fill the emptiness she felt inside. She lived in a gilded cage, admired by the world but unseen by the one man who mattered most. Her routine days began to blur into each other, marked by quiet mornings, visits to salons, and evenings wandering through a mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. Staff catered to her every need, but their presence only reminded her of the isolation in her marriage. It was during one of those quiet afternoons that she first noticed Omar, the new driver Kareem had hired. Young, reserved, and always professional, Omar kept his distance, never speaking more than necessary. Yet there was something about his quiet demeanor, the respect in his manner, and the kindness in his eyes that caught Layla's attention. At first, it was nothing more than polite exchanges, a nod of acknowledgement when he opened the car door, a brief word when he drove her to her appointments. But the silence between them carried an unspoken tension. Layla began to look forward to those small moments, the rare human connection in her otherwise empty days. Slowly, she started creating reasons to call on Omar. She asked him to drive her to places she didn't really need to go, lingering in the car to prolong the time they shared. For the first time in years, she felt seen, even if only in fleeting glances. The attraction grew quietly, like a shadow moving closer with each passing day. Layla told herself it was harmless, that she was simply bored and craved attention. But deep down, she knew she was standing at the edge of something dangerous. Her husband's pride and temper were well known, and in a society where appearances mattered more than truth, a secret like this could destroy everything. Still, Layla could not ignore the spark she felt every time Omar looked her way. It was a spark that threatened to ignite a fire she would soon be powerless to control. The secret bond between Layla and Omar deepened in ways neither of them had expected. What began as polite glances and quiet car rides soon evolved into something charged with desire and hidden longing. Layla felt alive for the first time in years. She would ask Omar to take her on long drives through the city at night, when the glittering towers of Dubai lit up the skyline. The hum of the car and the anonymity of the streets gave her a sense of freedom she had never known within the marble walls of her mansion. In those moments, the world outside her window didn't matter, and the roles of mistress and driver blurred into something more dangerous. It wasn't long before their connection crossed the invisible line. A lingering touch when he opened the car door. A stolen look in the rearview mirror. A whisper that carried more weight than words ever should. Layla convinced herself she deserved this escape. Kareem had abandoned her emotionally, leaving her starved for affection, and Omar filled that void with an intensity she could not resist. For Omar, the affair was intoxicating. He knew the risks, knew he was stepping into forbidden territory. But the allure of Layla's attention and the thrill of secrecy pulled him deeper. Their relationship became a carefully woven web of lies. Layla invented excuses to send the staff away, orchestrating moments when the mansion's grand halls fell silent except for the sound of her footsteps and Omar's nervous presence. Their meetings were hurried but passionate, fueled by the adrenaline of knowing they could be discovered at any moment. The affair gave Layla something she had long craved: control over her own happiness. Even if it came at a cost, she refused to consider. For Omar, it was a chance to taste a life far beyond his station, a dangerous dream that he could not let go of. But the mansion was not as private as Layla believed. The staff noticed the subtle changes in her behavior. A maid saw her linger in the garage longer than usual. Another overheard hushed voices late at night. The whispers among the household grew louder with each passing week, though no one dared confront her directly. In a world where loyalty was dictated by money and status, secrets were currency. And Layla's secret was too big to stay hidden. Omar began to feel the weight of the risk pressing down on him. He warned Layla that someone would eventually speak, that Kareem was not a man to be deceived. But Layla dismissed his fears, blinded by her newfound freedom and desperate to hold on to it. She told herself the walls of the mansion would protect her, that Kareem was too distracted by his empire to notice. What she did not realize was that cracks were already forming in her carefully constructed illusion of safety. Every glance exchanged, every moment stolen, was another step closer to disaster. The passion that had set her free was also leading her into a trap she would never escape. The fragile world Layla had built with Omar collapsed the moment truth slipped into the wrong hands. It started with an unexpected visit from Kareem's cousin, Tariq, who often came unannounced to check on the household while Kareem was away. Tariq had always been suspicious of Layla's distant demeanor and found her behavior oddly restless. One evening, while walking through the back of the property, he saw something that confirmed every doubt he had ever held. Hidden in the dimly lit garage, Layla and Omar stood too close, their bodies angled in a way that needed no explanation. Tariq left without a word, but his eyes had captured enough to destroy everything. When the news reached Kareem, he was in London finalizing a lucrative deal. The message came in the form of hushed words over the phone, Tariq's voice trembling with urgency. At first, Kareem refused to believe it. His pride would not allow him to imagine his wife betraying him with a man he had employed under his own roof. But the more Tariq described what he had seen, the harder it was to deny. Fury erupted inside him, a storm that consumed his every thought. For Kareem, betrayal was not just personal, it was public humiliation. In his world, where reputation meant power, being deceived by his own wife and a mere driver was intolerable. Kareem cut his trip short and returned to Dubai without informing Layla. From the moment he landed, his anger was meticulously contained, hidden behind a mask of calm determination. He began gathering information quietly, speaking to staff who, now emboldened, confessed what they had seen and heard. The whispers became undeniable evidence. A maid described Layla's late-night walks to the garage. The cook admitted hearing muffled laughter where there should have been silence. And the security guard mentioned unexplained gaps in surveillance footage. Every piece fit together, forming a picture Kareem could not ignore. Layla sensed a shift in the air the moment Kareem stepped through the door. He greeted her as usual, his voice steady, his face unreadable, but his eyes betrayed something darker. She felt the tension settle over the mansion like a heavy fog. Omar, too, grew uneasy. He noticed how Kareem's gaze lingered on him a fraction longer. How silence filled the space where there used to be indifference. Though nothing had been said, both Layla and Omar knew the truth was dangerously close to the surface. Fear began gnawing at Omar's composure. He urged Layla to end things before it was too late, but Layla clung to denial. She convinced herself that Kareem would never risk exposing his private shame, that he cared too much about appearances to act on what he might suspect. But Kareem was not a man who tolerated disgrace. Every second he pretended not to know was a second he spent calculating his next move. The household carried on with its daily rhythm, but beneath the surface, a silent war had begun. Kareem's pride demanded retribution, and he was a man who always got what he wanted. Layla's secret, once thrilling and intoxicating, had now turned into a ticking time bomb. She did not yet realize that Kareem's silence was not forgiveness. It was the calm before the storm that would change all of their lives forever. The night of reckoning arrived without warning. Layla had spent the afternoon distracted, pacing through the mansion as unease tugged at her heart. Omar had grown distant in recent days. his nerves frayed from the weight of secrecy. He sensed that Kareem knew more than he let on, yet Layla refused to accept it. She told herself Kareem's calmness meant safety, when in truth it was the mask of a man planning something far more sinister. That evening, the household was quieter than usual. The staff had been dismissed early, leaving an eerie stillness within the grand halls. Layla assumed Kareem wanted privacy, but the emptiness carried a sharp edge that made the air heavy. Kareem returned home late, his presence cold and deliberate. He said nothing of his day, nothing of his business, only watching Layla with an intensity that froze her in place. His silence was suffocating. When Omar arrived to park the car, Kareem's eyes followed him with a gaze that felt like a blade. Layla felt panic stir in her chest. The walls that had once sheltered her now seemed like barriers closing in. She realized too late that Kareem had orchestrated the night to strip her of any chance of escape. When the confrontation came, it was swift and merciless. Kareem summoned Omar into the private study, a room rarely used except for serious matters. Layla followed, desperate to intervene, but Kareem's tone carried a weight that made resistance impossible. In the dimly lit room, the truth unraveled in harsh silence. Kareem produced the evidence. He had gathered accounts from the staff, descriptions of their secret meetings, even grainy footage from hidden cameras. Each revelation cut through Layla's defenses until she could no longer pretend. Omar stood frozen, his hands trembling, knowing every word sealed his fate. Kareem's voice remained calm, but beneath it was a fury that threatened to explode. He spoke of betrayal, of humiliation, of how they had dared to mock him under his own roof. For a man like Kareem, betrayal was not a wound that could heal. It was an insult that demanded retribution. Omar tried to plead, but his words crumbled into silence. Layla, tears streaming down her face, begged for mercy, but Kareem's eyes were fixed on revenge. The man who had once built empires now sought only to destroy the lives that had disgraced him. The punishment was brutal in its precision. Kareem's men, loyal and unquestioning, appeared as if they had been waiting all along. Omar was dragged away despite his desperate struggle, his cries echoing through the marble halls. Layla collapsed, powerless to stop what she had set in motion. The mansion became a cage, its glittering chandeliers casting cruel light on the tragedy unfolding within. Kareem did not raise his voice, nor did he show rage in the way most men would. His vengeance was colder, sharper. Designed not just to end Omar's life, but to send a message that betrayal of Kareem Rahman carried consequences no one could escape. Layla's world shattered in that moment. The affair that once gave her life meaning had transformed into a nightmare. She realized the man she had defied was far more dangerous than she had ever allowed herself to believe. As Omar's fate was sealed, Layla was left with the chilling knowledge that her own punishment had only just begun. The desert outside Dubai held many secrets, and one of them was Omar's fate. His body was discovered days later, abandoned on a barren stretch of sand, far from the city's glittering skyline. The police recorded it as a violent attack with little explanation, and whispers spread quietly among those who dared to speculate. For the wealthy and powerful, stories like this often disappeared beneath influence and money. But inside the Rahman mansion, the truth was undeniable. Layla knew exactly what had happened, and the weight of her guilt became unbearable. The once vibrant woman who had thrived on the thrill of forbidden love was now a shadow of herself. She wandered the mansion's endless corridors aimlessly, haunted by the image of Omar's final moments. Her guilt gnawed at her constantly, feeding on the silence imposed by Kareem. He had made no attempt to comfort her, nor did he speak of the tragedy again. He returned to his business dealings as though nothing had happened, his composure chilling in its control. Layla, trapped within his world of dominance and secrecy, felt suffocated. Every corner of the mansion reminded her of the love she had lost and the mistake that had destroyed it. Kareem's vengeance had achieved what he wanted. Omar was gone, and Layla was broken. Yet even he could not escape the consequences of his actions. Behind closed doors, his reputation among his peers began to shift. Those who knew the whispers looked at him differently, their respect tinged with fear. Power sustained him, but it did not erase the hollow shadow left by betrayal. He had taken control of the situation in the only way he knew. But the cost was a wife who now lived in silent resentment and despair. For Layla, life became a prison. She was no longer the admired wife who dazzled at social gatherings. She withdrew from the world, refusing invitations and avoiding the gaze of others. Her reflection in the mirror was unrecognized as a blonde woman stripped of joy, trapped in a golden cage that no longer felt luxurious. Nights were the worst, when the mansion's silence amplified every memory. She would replay Omar's laughter, the drive through the city, the fleeting moments of freedom she once cherished. Each memory stabbed deeper, reminding her of what had been taken away. Her health began to decline as depression consumed her. The lavish dinners she once enjoyed went untouched, her once flawless appearance neglected. Kareem noticed the change but offered no comfort. In his mind, she had brought this upon herself. His revenge was complete, and her suffering was simply another consequence of betrayal. But beneath his cold exterior, even he was haunted. Omar's death had not restored his pride as he hoped. Instead, it had left behind a bitter emptiness. The mansion that once symbolized wealth and triumph now stood as a monument to tragedy. Layla's story became a silent, cautionary tale whispered among those who knew the truth. A reminder that beneath Dubai's glittering facade, betrayal and revenge could spiral into darkness. The affair that had begun as a desperate attempt to escape loneliness had ended in blood, grief, and shadows that no amount of wealth could ever erase.